Jai Shri Radhe, Sab Vaishnavanko Jai Shri Krishna. Continuing with the stories of the 252 Vaishnavas in English. Today is day 218 and we are on Varta 219. The story of one Kshatriya Vaishnava from Gujarat from whose pot Chachaji drank water. Bhav Prakash. This is a devotee of sattvic disposition. In the eternal Leela, his name is Sridhari. She manifests from Chandrabhan and is thus a personification of her divine loving sentiment. He was born into a wealthy family of Kshatriyas in Gujarat. Even from his very childhood, he was of a renounced nature. He did not get married and his parents died when he was 15. He wandered around looking for saints and holy mendicants. Part 1. Once Sri Gosaiji was travelling to Gujarat, he set up camp in this Kshatriya's village. He cooked for Sri Thakurji and made the offerings. He then sat in his batik in the pure state of aparas. The Vaishnavas from that village came there to see him. This Kshatriya came with them. When he saw Sri Gosaiji, he immediately asked him to grant him initiation with the Lord's name. Sri Gosaiji initiated him with the Lord's name and told him to fast the following day, whereafter he granted him the Brahmasambandh initiation. Sri Gosaiji went to the Kshatriya's home and stayed there for some time. Kshatriya Harivamsji was with him. The Kshatriya donated the entire contents of his home to Sri Gosaiji. No one else lived there. Sri Gosaiji set off from there to go to Dwarkaji. He reached there after quite a few days and had the holy sight of Sri Ranchoralalji. He then returned to Gokul and had the holy sight of Sri Navneet Priyaji. Part 2. Once Chacha Harivamsji and Krishna Bhatt were on their way to Ujjain. Chachaji came to this Vaishnava's home. The Kshatriya Vaishnava had recognized him and persuaded him to come to his house. Then he took him to his shop. He then asked Chacha Harivamsji, "Would you like some water to drink?" Chacha Harivamsji accepted water to drink from that Kshatriya Vaishnava. He only had this one large metal pot left after giving everything else to Sri Gosaiji. He used this pot for all his household chores. He filled it and brought it to Chachaji, who drank from it. When Chachaji went to get up, the Kshatriya stopped him and said, "Please do your cooking here." Chachaji said he must go. Kshatriya Vaishnava said, "When you come by this way again, please do come to my house." Chachaji agreed wholeheartedly and he left. On the way, Krishna Bhatt asked him, "Why did you drink water from that Vaishnava's hand? He does not adhere to our rules of purity." Chachaji addressed Krishna Bhatt, "Oh Bhattji, I did not even think about what rules he kept or he didn't. I saw him get initiated by Sri Gosaiji and I only remembered that. Therefore I drank water from him." Krishna Bhatt was silenced. Afterwards, Chachaji partook of Mahaprasad. Then he stayed in Ujjain for some time. He left Ujjain and came back to the Kshatriya Vaishnava's house, and the Kshatriya Vaishnava was very pleased. There were some pieces of jewellery and some money left in the house, and he gave these to Chachaji, asking him to take it all to Sri Gosaiji in Gokul. He said, "I do not need that much to survive on. Wealth should be with its master to whom it belongs." The Kshatriya's heart was very pure. Chachaji left there to go to Gokul. He showed everything he had brought with him to Sri Gosaiji and then deposited all in the storeroom. He offered prostrations to Sri Gosaiji on behalf of the Kshatriya Vaishnava and told him all the news about the trip. Sri Gosaiji said to Chachaji, "One should look at the purity of heart of a Vaishnava and not at his rules of etiquette. What is the point? One should look at how they are totally and loyal and not examine anything else." Chachaji felt very happy to hear these words of Sri Gosaiji. That Kshatriya was truly graced by Sri Gosaiji. Part 3. After this, the Kshatriya Vaishnava began to serve his Sri Thakurji whilst observing all the rules of etiquette. He would offer him only the very best preparations to him. He fed the Vaishnavas with Mahaprasad and would then join in with other Vaishnavas to listen to divine discourse. One day he heard the commentary on the piece Sri Gokul Ashtakam. He was overjoyed to hear it and decided that he should go to Gokul. He set off for Gokul, taking his Sri Thakurji with him, and he reached there after several days. When he had the holy sight of Sri Gokul, he felt faint and lost body consciousness. He saw Sri Gokul in exactly the same form as had been described to him. He also went to have the holy sight of Sri Navneet Priyaji. He made a donation. He saw the Lord swinging in his cradle and praised his own fortune to have been granted such a vision. When Sri Gosaiji had settled Sri Navneet Priyaji down for his afternoon nap, he came and sat in his batik. The next day Sri Gosaiji took the Kshatriya Vaishnava with him to have the holy sight of Sri Govardhanaji. They reached Srinathji Dwar, and Sri Gosaiji bathed and entered the temple. He completed the Seva up to the Rajbhog Arti. At that very time the Kshatriya Vaishnava had Sri Govardhanaji's holy sight and was blessed with the vision of him as the Supreme Divine Personality. Seeing which he fainted and remained in that state for 2 hours. Sri Gosaiji then came came to sit in his betak and thought to himself, Sri Thakurji is most merciful. He satisfies all the desires of the devotee's heart. The Lord accomplishes everything most effortlessly. Bhav Prakash. This teaches us that an embodied soul requires full and firm faith and the association with devotees who are close to the Lord. The company of such Vaishnavas is a great thing, and an embodied soul should seek their association, which effects their devotional reward accordingly. Part 1 continued. In this way, the Kshatriya Vaishnava spent many days close to Sri Gusaiji and Sri Govardhanaji. He then asked Sri Gusaiji's permission to go on Vrajayatra. He completed the tour of Vraj and returned to Sri Gusaiji and Sri Govardhanaji. Then Sri Gusaiji and he went back to Gokul. Sri Gusaiji is an ocean of grace, and he said to the Kshatriya Vaishnava, you must now make seva to your Thakurji very carefully. If there is anything you wish for, please tell me now. The Kshatriya Vaishnava replied, O Maharaj, I would like to go back to my home. Sri Gusaiji recognized his humility and granted his permission. The Vaishnava took his leave and arrived home after several days of travel. He began to serve his Sri Thakurji very nicely and caringly, and Sri Thakurji graced him in every way and would speak with him directly. He asked the Vaishnava for whatever he wished. Bhav Prakash, Sri Thakurji graces those whom the Guru blesses. Thus concludes Varta 219, the story of the Kshatriya Vaishnava who received Sri Gosaiji's great grace and was an accomplished Vaishnava. There is no end to his tale. Continuing now to Varta 220, the story of one Kshatriya Vaishnava from Gujarat who got separated from Chachaji on their journey and who ended up in another Kshatriya Vaishnava's home, Bhav Prakash. This is a devotee of Sattvic disposition. In the eternal Leela, his name is Vasumati, who is a dear Sakiji of Chandrakala. Chandrakala would tell Vasumati all about Sri Thakurji's private pastimes. Vasumati manifests from Rasabhadra, and is thus a personification of her divine loving sentiment. He was born into a Kshatriya family in Gujarat. He was 22 years old when, one day, Chachaji Harivamsji came to Gujarat. He arrived in this Kshatriya's village, and that is where they met. When the Kshatriya observed Chachaji's way of behaviour, he realised that he was an elevated soul and asked to become his disciple. Chachaji recognised that he was a divine soul and gave him initiation with the Lord's name and told him, my and now your Guru is Sri Vitalnathji Sri Gosaiji. The Kshatriya Vaishnava asked where Sri Gosaiji lived. Chachaji told him that he lived in Gokul. Later, the Kshatriya Vaishnava accompanied Chachaji to Gokul. He approached Sri Gosaiji, who granted him initiation with the Brahma Sambandh. Sri Gosaiji instructed him to reside with Chachaji, and he did so from that day on. Though through Chachaji's association, the Kshatriya Vaishnava began to experience the Lord's pastimes, he became so full of bliss, of the Lord's love, that he could hardly contain himself most of the time. Part 1. This Kshatriya Vaishnava came to take shelter in Sri Gosaiji through the good auspices of Chachaji and their father. He always resided with him. And there onwards, he always resided with him. He had a very good understanding of all the literature and discourses. Once, Chachaji and this Vaishnava were travelling to Gujarat. They lost their way. They got separated and went on different tracks. The Kshatriya Vaishnava arrived in one village where another Kshatriya Vaishnava was living. He stayed in his house where he was warmly welcomed. They cooked many kinds of preparations and offered all of them to Sri Thakurji. Then they would accept the offerings back and partake of the Mahaprasad. In the evenings, they would talk together about the Lord, and their satsangs were highly divine. And then they would fall asleep for the night and have the same routine the next and every day thereafter. Yes, so that their father should have been through the good auspices of Chachaji, and thereafter he always resided with him. Excuse the confusion. And last sentence, have the same routine the next and every day thereafter. We conclude the reading for today and will continue tomorrow. Jai Shri Krishna, sabko aaj ki anand ki jai, and Jai Jai Shri Radhe.